Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Hertz Tropic Trade Group, and it is Thursday. What is the date? Today is the 18th of February. We will go over the indices, some levels to watch on the indices. First things first, risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, education only, not giving out any advice, recommendations, anything of that nature. So, theme of the day, I put in here more high beta areas see a little bit of a deeper pullback. We'll go over that performance and what areas kind of got beat up today versus where there was a little bit of relative strength. I always like to see on days like this where we kind of start lower, what areas are going to outperform and do better, right? There you can kind of find some nice themes and possibly some trades, right? So first things first, we'll go over the performance. SPY finished down 40 basis points. Q's finished about the same, but you could see here in this column, which is what I tend to look for, is percentage change from the open. I want to see if areas were continued to be sold, or if buyers kind of stepped in, right? And again, that kind of helps me spot some themes for the day. So you could see, and then we had IWM, which continues to get hit a little bit, was down 1.5%, and a little bit of a bounce was faded. So let me go over those. Let's go over the indices first, and then we'll continue to kind of go through some things here. But we'll start with the S&P, as we always kind of start with the S&P, just for the overall theme. And if you're looking at this, or if you're mostly in S&P stocks, this isn't really too big of a thing for you right now. Yeah, it's a little frustrating that we're going sideways, but we're not really seeing too much of a pullback. As I have been saying this week, is that we're just right back to where we were last week in the S&P. So we're burning off a little bit of those very high sentiment levels. But you could see we did come in and test. Yesterday, by the way, we tested and we held the top of value, right? And that level to watch is 39.14. Today we kind of came in and went through that right around pre-market or so. And it looked like there was going to be a little bit of volatility, a little bit of a spill on the open, and that kind of continued for a little while to about 11 o'clock. But we did hold the bottom of value, and notice that this bottom of value, I'll zoom in here a little bit, this bottom of value, which is 3894, is very close to the top of value last week, which was also tested a number of times. So, we didn't have that powerful of a bounce. Buyers really, some things, well, and I'll go over a couple names that seem like, hey, you look at a couple names and be like, wow, this looks pretty good. And then you look at some other areas of the market and you're like, ugh, it doesn't look like there was that much conviction in buyers coming back in. I would say, in summary, kind of selective. And, I don't know, not to say that we're in a major move here in volatility, but I don't know if we're really through this type of chop that we're seeing this week. I would kind of chalk a lot of the move in the S&P, or I would categorize it more as chop. Some of the other areas, which I'll go over, look a little bit more, of a pullback type classification. Let's talk a little bit about the Qs, let's talk about Nasdaq. Again, this fell a little bit deeper. You could see what we did here, right? So I mentioned a nice rally off the lows. However, we're right back into that bottom of value. So it's a little bit tough to really make a conclusion that this was a powerful buy the dip, because you could even draw a trend line in here too. Maybe that's not perfect, but you could see that we haven't really taken that back. So I'll kind of talk a little bit about what I did for the day, but it's a lot of nibbling on some things today, because again, I don't know if we're really done with this. Even though there's a little bit downside price action, the sentiment has been so hot that really needs to be washed out for a decent rebound, right, to take place. So I think, and kind of some of my thoughts through the day were to just kind of be patient as we're kind of seeing this. So, and I finished today. I try to be as transparent as possible. This was not a fun, incredibly fun day for me. I finished down for the day, and I think right now, the best way to kind of deal with this right now is to have on less positions, right? Even I kind of reduce some positions, but I still have some positions. And I talked about in yesterday's video too. I think this morning too in the TTG pre-market session. You're trying not to have many option positions on because that's where you could really get dinged. When some things go down like 3% for the day, your option premium gets smoked, right? So like I have an Uber position on that's out in what September, I think it is, and that was my biggest loss for the day, right? Or that and a couple other things, but but yeah, if you have option positions on those, you're going to feel that the most if one of those names that you're in happens to go down a decent clip for the day. So that's where Nasdaq is, and so again, in like a very much an indecision area. We could fail and we could kind of go back and explore some levels down here, or we could rebound a little bit. And then even if we do rebound a little bit, I think it's going to be still a little bit choppy. Let's look at IWM here for a minute. So again, kind of came into the week and was the strongest of, for the indices, and now is kind of leading lower, right? Again, not much of a bounce at all here in the small caps today. Right, and I know that's been a very strong area. Is that the end of the world? No. It just may be that we got to get through a little bit more of February. Remember too, like I know these things kind of get lost. That February in an election year is kind of tough. So we had a really good first couple of weeks of the year, and now we're getting what February kind of lives up to for seasonality. It's usually a tough month. So the best thing I would say for this is if you can scalp a little bit, and try to take off, keep your trade size down, and whenever we were met with a little bit of a pullback, as we're seeing here in definitely more so in IWM, to be more defensive than anything else is just the way to get through it, right? You don't want to give back a lot of your profits from either from the beginning of this year or the beginning of February. It's just basically to try to be defensive. And I know everybody comes in every day and they want to make money, right? But really, that you should be worried again. My philosophy is always to be worried about how much you could lose a day versus how much you can win. And I think some of this too is it's good, for the market to pull back a bit, right? We talked about this. I keep referencing the Sunday video that I mentioned that a lot of areas were overextended, right? And I'm happy. I sent that video out, by the way, on Twitter. I think yesterday, just talking, I went through all the sector ETFs in the TTG Macro Sunday video, and I talked about, I said, all the ARK ETFs are really extended, right? So I have here. I'll bring this. See if I can bring this up here for a second. But I'll show you just to kind of see where they are now on FinViz, right? So for example, if I bring up my screener and I bring up my sector watch list. I've got a ton of watch lists in here, right? So if we look at these things, right? If you look at ARKF and it's funny because I see people kind of judging the ARK. Oh, geez, maybe these ARK things aren't that great. Well, you have to remember, look at look at where they were, right? I mean, and I said this in the video too on Sunday. I said, do you think that this is a good place to buy all the way up here or to take profits? So there's nothing that's going to be that is going to go up in a straight line forever, right? No matter how damn good the investment is or the philosophy of a fund is, it shouldn't just go up in a straight line, right? So I would think about that too. And we talked a little bit about Kathy Wood being on CNBC yesterday. Somebody just asked me a question about the ARK funds. I think they're great investments for the right time frame, right? They have a 5-year time horizon. So I've talked about this a number of times. If you're coming in and looking to day trade, their funds, that's really not what the premise of their funds are. So, keep that in mind. They continue to see a lot of inflows, but again, they should be inflows for not just day trading vehicles. And same thing with the file that comes out in the ARK. In the ARK end of day stuff, everybody goes bananas if there's a name that's on it. Oh, did you see what they bought? They have a 5-year time horizon, right? We talked about this name earlier in the week, right? look at this thing, down another 2.5%. Everybody went bananas last week, right? Oh, their ARK is buying Unity software. Oh my God, it's so great. I still think it's got to go down to 111, right? For me, to give a shot at like a buy the dip trade, right? So they were buying it in here, and it's down. So I point these things out because I just see this type of thing over and over on Twitter. I get a lot of questions about that. So you want to put that in perspective. So my perspective is when I see that file, I look at the file that comes out from ARK at the end. I'm on the email distribution, and I just say, hey, it's kind of interesting, right? They're positioning into this or they're positioning into that, but I'm not going to go in the after hours market and buy something just because ARK decided to put on a position, right? There's so much attention to it. It's really not, in my opinion, how it should be interpreted. But hey, if you can make money somehow off of that type of thing, then go for it. But I just think it's really being misinterpreted. So why did I bring these charts up? Because just to kind of give some perspective about how far these things kind of got in front of themselves. Even the software ETF, which had a pretty decent day today, from the lows. So this is still extended stuff, and it does help that FinViz puts these trend lines, draws these trend lines in for you so that you could see how extended some of these things were. So again, I'm using the word perspective a lot, but you have to just kind of realize that the market is going to quite normally come in sometimes, right? And I think that's what we're doing, and right now we're trying to establish a footing. So the conclusion here is I don't know if a lot of things have found a footing yet. So I'm going to go over some more names. I'm going to go through some names, but I wanted to go through sectors too. The VIX was up 4.6% for the day too, so that should give you a little bit of a sign too that volatility is still present when it increases for the day. Bonds, have been, that volatility picked up a little bit when bonds sold off in the beginning of the day, but they did find some buoyancy. Kind of remember what happens too is that bonds go lower, and then if people kind of get worried, then the bonds act as a safe haven, and they were bought a little bit from the lows this morning. I think this is a good index to look at, right? This is a Merrill Lynch index. It's the volatility. So again, remember when we talk about the VIX, I always try to just make sure everybody understands what the VIX is. It just measures short-term volatility, implied volatility, and the S&P, right? Specifically, about 30-month out options. That's all the VIX does, right? So this is different. This is a volatility measure for treasuries that Merrill Lynch has put together. So you could see that this is kind of picked up a little bit. Now, there is a little bit of a relationship right now with the VIX, right? And so the volatility in the S&P and the volatility in bonds, they're kind of both. This obviously was this big move in last year, but you can kind of see volatility. When the volatility in bonds tends to move up, sometimes it moves the volatility in equities as well. All right, not so much this. The blue line is the VIX, right? And notice that when the VIX moves up, right, the volatility in equities, it doesn't have much of an effect on fixed income, right? Fixed income is boss, right? Fixed income is a lot bigger market. It is what it is. It's a lot, it's a lot smarter of an area too, fixed income versus equities. So just keep that in mind. I don't know, just a little bit of an analysis there. Sectors, right? So what performed the best from the open? Consumer discretionary came back. Software had a nice day from the lows, right? So there were some nice stories there in software. I'll go through a couple of those names. Internet names. Utilities were kind of strong all day today too. They were one of your best performers on the day. XLU finished up 60 basis points. Consumer staples were strong too. So it did feel like a little bit risk off with those sectors, but there there was a little bit of that buy the dip mentality in some areas. Now, if we look further down here, what names really got beaten up? Pot stocks, which I think is warranted. You know, very high speculative areas come back to earth pretty quickly. Also, besides the pot stocks, the solar stocks have been getting beaten up. They were down 6.4%, and they continue to fall, throughout the session. So also clean energy stocks, right? So again, I referred to a lot of these things, clean energy stocks, and I have positions in some of these things, but not so much the pot stocks, but I refer to a lot of these areas as fluff, right? Even the blockchain stuff, right? Highly speculative areas, right? They get hit from time to time. Why? Because again, it's just how speculation works. And you can see how speaking of the ARK funds, they were all down about 2% for the day. Again, a bit overcrowded, right? This is called shaking out the weak hands of the market, right? A lot of flows going into those ARK ETFs. Well, some of them buying at the wrong time, as we just talked about with this, right? Just buying at the wrong time, right? All those inflows, and I've been tweeting those out. I monitor ETF flows on a day-to-day basis, and yeah, I'm like, I see these flows every day coming in at the absolute highs, extended areas, but it doesn't seem like some of these whoever these buyers are care that much. Maybe they're caring now a little bit, now that they've corrected a little bit. Okay, so what areas showed some relative strength? Number one on my list was Wix. Right, really, really nice. This had good earnings the other day. Was up 13%. I kept mentioning this in the room today, that Wix, and if you look at the weekly chart, right, we've been looking at this for the last couple weeks, but really the star. And again, a name that's not a big portion, I don't think, of any index, so that helped. A couple other areas of the market too. We mentioned software here. I'll bring up what some software names did today. I could go through a couple of these, but let me just bring up this screen so that you could see it too. But Coupa Software was very strong today. That had relative strength. Datadog was up 3%. There's your Coupa Software. Right, this is the weekly chart. Out to new highs. So again, nice strength there. Nice bullish engulfing. I also saw this. I'm sorry, that's not bullish engulfing, but it did take out this this little area of consolidation and out to new highs. Also, this other one, Team, right? Also, back at all-time highs. So again, some nice strength there. I also liked there was continuous call activity in Western Digital, right? You have to zoom out here a little bit in Western Digital to see that this thing, could continue to kind of retrace some levels, 75, 78. I'm long a little bit of Western Digital. Micron got a nice analyst note today. They were strong, right? Some memory chips and things like that, up 2.9%. So again, different to see, some of these areas that, look like a normal day for some of these stocks, right? And that's kind of what we want to look for on days like this. There was a SPAC name too that saw a lot of option activity. I can't remember what it was, the golden one. I didn't take that trade. But here's what I did today. I always look at SE on day. I do have a watch list too. That's for dips, right? SE, got a little bit of extended too. I was out of a swing trade somewhere in here, right, after buying it on the 50-day moving average, and I have this in the TTG Trend Portfolio as well. But now you got a little bit of a dip, and I like to buy dips in this name, so I did that today, right, just with a starter position, because as I said, I don't know if we're completely out of the woods yet. I unwound a couple things, probably right around the lows of the day, because I put on an Airbnb starter, right? So this happens to me. Sometimes I unwind things at the wrong time. I'm human, but I put this Airbnb on yesterday, thinking that it would hold support, which is 1 hour support. It didn't hold it. Right, so a lot of times if I put a starter position on, which I did in Airbnb, I put one on an apps as well, which I think came back a little bit. But if it doesn't hold what I'm looking for, right? It actually couldn't get into value. I was going to add to it if it did. But if it doesn't do what I want it to do, sometimes I abandon the position pretty quickly, because then it creates a whole different picture, right? So sometimes I take losses on some of these things, because again, I was looking for this thing to kind of turn the corner and a bull flag. Now, I mean, now you're down to another new level, so I'll be watching this name tomorrow. I traded a little bit of Home Depot, which worked. I held the last piece of it, and it didn't really work out for me. But I did manage. This was a profitable trade for me. Home Depot in the beginning of the day, kind of held in there. Amazon, I thought, was interesting too. We noticed that it was showing a little bit of relative strength yesterday. Still finished up for the day. So I noticed that there was this 3,320 level that was acting as resistance, right? We tried to break through it right around 11 o'clock this morning, failed, retreated a little bit, and then the second time we actually took it out, but really didn't go too far. So, and you could see also this 3,321 level on the 1 hour chart too. So it's coming back and retesting. It's fine if it holds here. This Amazon has been so tricky. So if it holds here, it's fine. If it starts to break back below 33.20, I'll abandon that trade. But I did take a target in it. Next target was going to be, I think, 3,342, but didn't get there. All right. So I did put on a little call spread for next week. Right, and that's it. So, I think overall bottom line message is that some things, showed some relative strength and performed a bit better. But it still feels to me that, the heavy lifting, we really need to see some buyers kind of come in and see that this is a dip to buy. And I don't think we're seeing that completely yet. Right, as well as if I would have saw the VIX go red on the day, that would have given me confirmation. Right, so whenever we get hit with like a little bit of a market turn, or a little bit of a bigger dip in some areas of the market, as I outlined, I always go through the same playbook. Right, I'm looking at the VIX. Right, I'm looking at important support and resistance levels for the overall indices. I'm also looking at market breadth, which never convinced me today. It never really got close to turning positive for the day, which tells me like it didn't convince me that we're completely out of the woods. Could we, if buyers come back in tomorrow? Sure. And that's why I kind of added some things, because again, we're always dealing in a world of uncertainty, right? And trying to make decisions every day based on a world of uncertainty. So you kind of have to take all the facts together and say, decide what you're going to do. And when things line up a little bit more for me, I'm a little bit more aggressive. They didn't line up for me, so I traded lightly for the most part, and we'll continue to be patient, right? Which I know is tough as traders, because if we have a little bit more volatility tomorrow, right? I don't want us to take too much of a step back in terms of losing money, right, and giving back this month's gains. All right, guys, that's it for the day. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.